what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of the modifiers. Now the modifiers are located, up here, the tool buttons for them, to the right of the draw tools. And essentially what they do is they modify things that we've already drawn. So it includes tools like moving, copying, stretching, scaling, rotating, so on and so forth. And we're going to get into those a little bit later, but we're just going to start with a couple of them. And the first one we've already done in the earlier videos, but we're going to use the erase tool. And the erase tool button is right up here. It looks like a little pencil eraser. Or we can type in E for erase. Before, what we had done is we had selected the objects and then type in E and enter for erase. As I noted, we can either do it before or after. So here we're starting first. And you'll notice that my crosshairs went from a crosshair now to a square, and that's an indicator that we're in the command, and you can see that down below. So what it's asking us to do is we've already told it that we want to erase something, and now it's asking us to select the objects. So what I'm going to do is you're going to select them the same way that we've learned in the last tutorial, in that you can select them using what I call the blue selection box, or the green selection box, or you can pick them. Now, it's good practice, okay, to essentially, start selecting things and working with the selection tools and the ways of selecting objects, because you'll find that some are more applicable than others, okay? In this case, what I would do is I would just take a huge box and select everything, okay? Just a huge swatch, large swatch, and erase everything. But there are times when you do want to pick and choose, and again, it's just getting practice, okay, with the three different ways that you start to work with the selection. So now I've selected my objects, and I can hit enter, and now they're going to be erased. Next, for the copy tool. And for the copy tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a circle. Okay, so now we have the circle like how we have made them before. Before we made it arbitrarily, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give it a dimension to, let's say, the diameter of it, okay, to get a little bit more advanced with it. With the circle tool, it's going to ask us to specify the center point first. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do first, and click. And then you'll see down below, okay, it's going to ask me to specify the radius, which is the default. So I could type in, let's say, 6, and it will give me a foot diameter. Or if I know that I want a foot diameter, okay, I know to hit D, okay, for diameter. Or even I could click on that. It's another feature that AutoCAD has. You don't always have to type in the D, but now you're able to just click, within the command line too, and I can type in 1 foot. And again, you do have to have that foot tick in order for it to recognize it as a foot. If you don't and leave it blank, it will be 1 inch. Okay, again, going back to our last lesson on typing in our dimensions. So now I have a circle with a diameter of 1 foot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the copy tool. And the copy tool button is right up here, or you can type in copy, or if I type in C to get started, you'll see that CO is the alias for copy. So I can type in CO and enter, and I can select my objects. Now you can either select one object or multiple objects. It doesn't matter, okay? You can do it as many as you want. And I'm going to just, use my, let's say, green selection box in order to select that. And again, because it says it's green, I don't have to select, it doesn't have to be encompassed, by the green box. And then, once I have everything selected, I'm going to hit enter, or you can right click, or you can hit spacebar, again, however you like to indicate enter to AutoCAD. And then it's going to ask me to specify a base point, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm just going to click anywhere, okay? And what's it's doing, it wants to know where to copy, what's point A for copying it and make it go to point B. So at this time, what we can do is we can actually just click arbitrarily, okay? And if I want it to move 5 feet over, okay, I can type in 5 feet and hit enter. Okay, if I still want to copy, you know, say I want another circle to be 10 feet away, okay, it's still going to work off of this origin point. So this is 5 feet, and now I have to type in 10 feet in order to do that. Okay, and then I can copy these guys again, and, you know, showing that you can copy multiple circles, okay, multiple objects, and I can copy them, let's say 5 feet below that, and then hit escape when you're done. So there's multiple ways, you know, of working with this copy tool as well. You know, either doing singular objects, multiple objects, you know, doing copying it arbitrarily, or actually snapping it to a real dimension. So you can start to have more control now when you're drafting about where things are positioned. Now, to go back a second and look at these O snaps again, okay, or to look at these drafting settings again, there's what's called an object snap, okay, and that's located down below, okay, in your drafting settings tray, and it's essentially what looks like a square or a rectangle with a little green, you know, like dot in the upper left-hand corner. And this also has the function key, okay, that's associated with it. It's the F3 key. So again, you can turn it on and off as you need to. And this is an extremely, extremely, extremely important part of AutoCAD. And the reason being is that this is what guarantees that we have the most accurate drawings that we can have. So what this does, what this object snap does, is if I expand it, you'll see, and then that's just by using the little down arrow right next to it, is there's a bunch of settings that are default. Okay, you'll see that whatever's default has the check. And those are essentially what your cursor is going to snap to when you start to draft. So you have endpoint, midpoint, node, perpendicular, nearest. Those are all, you know, essentially, in my AutoCAD, they're selected by default. And I can start working with it off the bat. Okay, again, you should work with this, you know, and the more you work with it, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And it's also, again, one of those things that's very personal to how people draft. You know, some people like to use just, you know, some selected. Some people like to use them all selected. Okay, and you'll find that, you know, sometimes if you have all selected, that things will start to get kind of finicky. Okay, but again, you know, it's a personal preference, and you'll get this experience the more you work with AutoCAD, you know, to try to figure out what you like, what you don't like. But do not, you know, go through AutoCAD not using these, because these are extremely, extremely important. Okay, so what this does, so say for example, midpoint. Okay, if I go back into my model space and I make sure, okay, that my object snap is on, and I know it's on because it's blue, what I can do is, let's use the move command, okay? And if I type in M for move, okay, that's the alias, or you can type in move, or you can use the tool button up here and hit enter, I can select my objects and then hit enter, and it's going to specify a base point. Well, now what I can do is I can actually specify the base point using those object snaps as long as they're on. Now with the circle always needs you know, the center on in order for you to get the middle of it. But you'll notice that when I move my cursor over the you know, the arc of the circle, there's a screen that looks like two triangles, you know, kind of meeting in the middle. And if I leave my mouse for a second, it says nearest, and that's the nearest object snap. Now, this is a little bit arbitrary in the way that it's just the nearest point on that object. So it's snapping to the object, but it's snapping to the nearest point. Okay, so let's say I need something to be more accurate. I can't just, you know, go by that. I want the center on. So I'm going to go to my object snaps. I'm going to expand it. I'm going to click on center to make sure now that that has a check after it. And then I'm going to now mouse over my circle, and you can see that now my center and it'll snap to the center, and now I can move both of these objects from that center. Okay, so let's say 3 feet, and I can move them over. Now where copy makes a copy, move doesn't make a copy, it just moves it. Now if we have a line, okay, I just drew an arbitrary line, its object snaps are going to be a little bit different. So if I go to move, okay, select my object, hit enter, and then I move my mouse over it, you'll see that there's a few that are associated with it. We have the nearest, okay, but we also have endpoints and we have midpoints. So I can take either an endpoint and move it from there, or a midpoint and move it from there, let's say 2 feet. And I can start to be more accurate with the way that, I am starting to use my, my drafting. And this is going to be especially important when we start to draft up a space. Now, what happens is a lot of times, okay, so maybe I get to this point, but I really, I really didn't want to get to this point. Okay, I really just kind of say this is a column grid, and I wanted these to go back to where they were. AutoCAD has an undo and a redo. So if I type in U for undo, okay, you can also type in undo, or you can go to the undo button, up at the top in the quick settings. I can hit enter, and what it does is it undoes the last step. So what it did is it undid my zoom. So I can hit undo again, okay, and it goes back to that last zoom. Now, the one thing about just hitting enter is it redoes your last command. So I could actually hit enter and enter and enter, and it can cycle through all of those moves that I want to undo. So you'll hear people all the time, hitting, their enter tool, key in order to undo steps. You can also just hold it down, but granted, it does go a little bit faster when it undoes things. But a lot of times, you'll hear people just like hitting their enter key all the time, and you're just like, just hold it down because it does the same thing. So now, I get to this point and I may have gone too far. So now what I want to do is I want to redo, and I type in REDO for redo. And what that does is it redoes the last step. So there's nothing to redo. It's not allowing me to redo anything because there's nothing to redo. But let's say I draw a line and I undo it, and now I can type in redo if I want to get the line back, or if I undo it, I can also go up to the top and click redo, and that also brings my line back. Now you can expand these, okay, to kind of see the list that you can go back to. So it kind of works like Photoshop in a way, if you've dealt with the history in Photoshop, is that you can go back a series of steps. It can go back far to what I've been doing in the last tutorials, but for whatever you undo, okay, you'll see that redo also has the same things. And so typically, where you might redo one step, okay, you can actually go and access the list and redo a series of steps. So it does have a little bit of a memory in order to allow you to do that. Another way that we can use the object snaps is if we want to start to build upon objects. So first of all, if I take a rectangle, okay, and draw it, maybe I want to have a line that snaps to this rectangle somewhere. So what the object snaps are good for is that they can constrain that snap to that point on the rectangle. So for example, I took a line here, and if you have the snaps also on, you can actually override the ortho. So for example, if I just click and make a line out in the distance and I want to snap it to this endpoint, okay, I can make sure that my cursor is actually snapping to the endpoint, and I know that with the green box, that's the endpoint symbol, and then it also says endpoint to reinforce that, and then I can click and then hit escape in order to make sure that those lines meet. Okay, and that is how the object snap really helps with the accuracy of our drawings. I can do the same thing to midpoint. Okay, I can do things to the nearest point, although that's going to be more arbitrary. But you'll see that you can start to make things a lot more accurate once you start working with the O snaps, and that's why they're so important to learn to use.